At the end of the day, it's not about what you have or even what you've accomplished. It's about what you've done with those accomplishments. It's about who you've lifted up, who you've made better. It's about what you've given back. Denzel Washington. Welcome to Inspire Vision. Our sole purpose is to elevate the lives of others and to inspire you to do the same.
Nedjma, welcome to the show.
Thank you, Dr. Doug. It's a pleasure to be here.
Well, that's going to be an exciting topic, and I've got a lot of questions for you on this, so hopefully that'll be fun. What I'd love for you to do, though, is to share with the audience your journey. What brought you to this point in your life where you're doing what you're doing, and be happy to, share who you are, what you've done in your life, and why you're here now.
Yeah, so it started kind of unconventional. I was actually a pharmacist for just over a decade. And because I had struggled myself in my personal life with a lot of people pleasing, I had developed generalized anxiety disorder because I was just kind of always nervous about, did I say the right thing, not the right thing? And social situations, I just wanted to be accepted and pleased. And I have kind of like this shield. And I was always assessing coming from stuff from childhood. And then through the journey of becoming a pharmacist, I'm from Canada and I moved to the US. I had to transfer my license. There was a lot of studying involved. I started to really amp up the anxiety, and I realized, gosh, this cannot continue. This cannot continue. And my doctor wanted to prescribe me an anti-anxiety. And because I'm a pharmacist, I was just like, this is not the route. Yeah, this is not the route I want to take. I felt I was young, and I felt I knew that there were non-pharmacological ways to go about these things. So that got me into a rabbit hole of self-development, self-growth. I went into YouTube. I gobbled up everything I could find. I took trainings. I went overseas even to get certifications on coaching, initially for me. Initially to heal myself and actually feel better and be happier, have more joy, be able to be with others without that anxiety, without feeling like I needed to fit in or say the right thing or just laugh at the joke, right? So, but what happened is that as I was accumulating these certifications and these trainings, and I realized this was good. This was actually changing my life and my appreciation and freedom in living the fullness of life. And so my interest for pharmacy started to dwindle a little bit. And then I really wanted to start helping people and really be immersed in this world, in what I'm learning and what I'm giving. And so when the opportunity came to leave my career, at that point, I was working in the pharma industry. I was a medical information specialist, and I was up for a promotion. And I got the opportunity to apply and then be invited to become a Tony Robbins coach full time.
Wow.
So I made the decision to burn my boat and jump. I was like, okay. And I left my career. My boss was very surprised because obviously, this was not planned. And I joined the team. And just for almost 2 years, I was a full-time coach with Tony Robbins. I had done a little bit on the side before, but it was nothing like going full time. And as much as I love Tony's mission, it felt like I had this calling to serve women, because what I am now is a women empowerment mentor coach. And my passion is to help women stop dimming their lights.
Okay. So
okay.
Go ahead. No, finish.
No, just so they can learn to really be themselves. Because that's the desire. Like, how can I unleash? Can I be myself and also have deeply connected relationships? Because oftentimes it feels like we can only have one or the other.
Why women?
Why women?
Yeah.
My son asked me that. He's 8. He's like, Mommy, what to help women? And really simply, I think men. I love men too, obviously. Like I'm married, I have my son. There's nothing, just really, that's my own experience. It's important for me, and that's why I'm calling myself a mentor coach. As a coach, and I've done that with Tony Robbins, like you can coach anyone, anywhere, on anything. That's not a problem. But when you bring mentorship, it comes from a lived experience. This is my journey. So I'm bridging the two, and I know how to be a feminine energy. I know what it's like to be a woman stuck in her masculine, and that's kind of part of the journey, and learning to develop the feminine and be herself. So that's why I'm focusing on women, because I don't have a first person experience of what it's like to be a man and come into being your full masculine.
Okay, so you were a coach with Tony Robbins for 2 years. I assume you use his DISC test to analyze personalities, right?
His disc, yes, absolutely.
So here's my question.
Yeah.
I don't know if you use the advanced one or just the standard one, because, I went online and took a standard one and I found that it was not totally accurate. And so the one that I use, he may have purchased it and then put his name on it. I know some other people have, but
yeah.
Here's my question. Have you found that, number one, this experience of wanting to empower women because they feel overwhelmed, they don't feel good enough, all those types of things. Have you found that it's more women than men? And I'm going to get to why I think it may be, but go ahead.
Do you mean more women than men that are overwhelmed? Is that what you're saying?
Yes.
Well, that's a good question.
Here's the reason I'm asking. Here's the reason I'm asking, because I know when you get into the DISC test and the personality evaluations and so forth, you've got your right brain, you've got your left brain. And I know from studies and research that the majority of women are more right brain. They're more emotional. They're wonderful. That's really where they need to be. And men tend to be more left brain, which makes them kind of a pain in the neck once in a while. But but here's the question: with women being more right brain, you find that they tend to experience this a little bit more than men.
I think they get overwhelmed for different reasons. If I'm just thinking back when I was coaching both, men would get more overwhelmed because they want to be the breadwinner. They want to provide, right? So it's like they want to take on, they have a lot, or maybe at work, it could be sometimes with the amount of work, because there's that desire of the masculine, in my opinion, that wants to provide, wants to be a leader, wants to take care of the team. Not that women don't, but it just feels a little different. Women feel overwhelmed oftentimes, and those are generalizations, of course, this crosses over, but women would be more caring for their family, wanting to do everything, wanting to wear all the hats, wanting to be everything for everybody. So it's in more like in a caring way, not that men don't care, they do, right? But that's the distinction that I feel might be where the overwhelm shows up differently.
Okay, and do you find that they fit into a particular personality profile?
When I use the disc every day with all my clients, like I delivered over 2,000 one-on-one sessions, and most of them was with using the disc, I definitely see patterns, and I've definitely seen that this assessment is accurate. It might not be accurate to the number, or there might be some, how you're taking the test. There's always human error. But in general, if you look at general, like what DISC is, general energies, yes, I've definitely seen that. When I see the profile and then I speak to the person for the first time, I would say 90% of the time plus, it would make sense.
Well, and the reason I ask that, and what I find is because I've used that a lot too, as I've worked with people, is that I talk about the fact that where we look at the strengths, when you look at any behavioral analysis, whether it's DISC or whatever, you look at those strengths, and then you realize that if they allow it to go too far, it becomes a weakness.
Totally.
And in my mind, a lot of times, whoever it is, and particularly here where we're talking about women, there's such great strength in who they are and their personalities and so forth. But when it goes a little bit too far, all of a sudden it becomes that weakness. And in your case, people pleasing is the type of individual that you're working with. So what do you find causes this sense of people pleasing? Because I know that you're using NLP. I know you're using all sorts of things to figure this out. What have you found in general are the main causes for women to become people pleasers?
So in my experience and what I've seen, people pleasing comes from childhood. It really is a learned habit, is a way we're coping with the world. Because we learn as kids, like, we feel safe when people accept us. We feel safe when people approve of us, and we want to be loved, we want to belong. And so there's things along the way that we picked up that if we just do like mommy and daddy want me to be, then I get praise, then I get more love. And then when I don't, then I get punished. And so even a very well-intentioned parent just doing their best might actually cause this child to understand this. So it doesn't necessarily need to come from trauma or anything like that.
No.
It's just picking up along the way, like, oh, listen to your teacher. Like, I'm bring an apple, I get an A. So there's just this learning along the way. And then oftentimes women who struggle with people pleasing the most is that there's has been a little bit of that shame of who I am is not good enough, who I am is not desirable. And so just the way I am is not lovable enough. So I need to tweak myself to please, because me as I am is not enough or is not good.
Well, and I think it's interesting. I have 4 kids, and I really worked hard. Believe me, I've gone through this for a number of years. I really worked hard to make sure that they had a healthy childhood growing up and so forth. And still, there's times that it's like, oh, Dad, you expect so much of us. And, and I realize that to some degree, it's my fault to some degree, but also it's their perception. And I think it's so interesting that we cannot ever determine what the perception of one of our children is going to have based on anything we do. We may come in from our heart and with love and wanting to help them, and their perception may be entirely opposite.
100%. You can have 2 kids living the same stuff and then interpreting it completely differently or developing different coping mechanisms from it. So I'm not an expert of, the personality and how that might play a role. But it definitely does. Some people will become the golden child, and some people will become, the rebel with the same situation.
And that's so true. And it's interesting, as I was reading your bio, I recognized that I saw that you use 3, at least you mentioned 3 major areas that you do it, maybe 4, but 3. NLP, which is neuro-linguistic programming. And I'll have you explain to the audience what that is. Then you have hypnotherapy. And I think a specific type of hypnotherapy. And then also you combine Eastern philosophy. So I would love for you to share how you use all of those 3 areas in helping people and why it's important to touch on each one of those.
Yes. Well, because I'm coming from a very intuitive and feminine approach, it's not like I'm like, okay, here's the technique I'm going to use. That's from NLP, that's from hypnosis, right? I'm this complex person who has all this knowledge. Neurolinguistic programming, there's different teachers. I learned with one of the co-founders, John Grinder, in Portugal, and there's pretty much what is it? If I would explain this, it's very vast, so it's really hard to explain in a short period of time. But it really works with the unconscious mind.
Yes.
So the patterns that are used oftentimes are to try and fix, so to speak, which is not my favorite thing. My husband loves to fix. He's really great at it. But the things that I've taken from NLP are more understanding how we experience things from our visual, kinesthetic, auditory perspective. And if we change just kind of like the building blocks of that experience, it changes how we feel and how we experience the situation of the person.
Yeah. So you can take someone back, for instance, to a childhood experience.
Yes.
Where their perception, in fact, I had one client, his perception was, he was shoved to the back of the room. I think he's 3rd or 4th grade, something like that. The teacher telling him it was stupid, therefore he's going to the back of the room. So that was his perception. And as we used NLP to go back and reprogram the perception, all of a sudden he realized that, it had nothing to do with him because he really was brilliant. It had everything to do with the teacher. And so by just doing that, it made all the difference in the world. So that's kind of what you're doing with NLP, right?
Absolutely. Yeah. So that's a reframe. Going back in time, that's more like timeline therapy, which is part of NLP as well. And, like the visual, kinesthetic, auditory could be just like in the moment, like I'm afraid of something. And if you're trying to look, it's like, oh, well, how does that represent? Well, I see this person mad, like super close and blown up in front of my face, in color, bright, right? Oh, what if you make it smaller, black and white, push it away, right? We can play with kind of that immediate experience to change the feeling in the body and the charge of that.
Right. So with hypnotherapy, do you use a specific type? And again, I think you were explaining, and if I understood what you were saying correctly, you have these tools at your disposal, and depending on the individual and what they need at that moment in time, you bring something in.
That's correct. Yeah, absolutely. It's just depending on what's needed in the moment in that interaction with a person. It will just come to me because I have this tool belt of all the different tools.
Right.
And hypnotherapy, I studied alchemical hypnotherapy, alchemical hypnosis, which is a bit more of a spiritual aspect of it, which brings a lot of NLP. It's a bridge of different things called shamanism. So it's a body of work that, of course, you induce people into hypnosis, but it's a light level. It's not that level like I don't remember anything. It's a level where you interact with the person. So you're really acting as a guide, and you're not imposing the direction, like you're guiding them in their experience, and they are the guide of that experience, so to speak. And it works also with finding inner guides, whether you believe in that spiritually. My husband studied it too, and for him, it's a metaphorical representation that helps you. So you work with, let's say, you go back to childhood, and then you can actually call in an inner mother. That's more of like a representation of a stronger force that helps you with that event. So there's also regression in childhood as well with that. I don't specifically do alchemical hypnosis sessions. The way I use it is I like to lead journeys. So it's leading me to really understand how to lead people in a journey, how to get them into a level of hypnosis. So it's kind of like you'd say a meditation, a guided meditation, if you want to call it that way. So you wrap your head around it. But it's really powerful. Like, for example, in one of my courses, we get to go to the future and meet your future self that have let go of all these people-pleasing tendencies, and really observe like the life she lives, and really get a feel of like what it's like, and get into her body and feel that confidence and strength and what it's like. And then we get to anchor that into the present, bringing the future to the present, right? We talk about that in manifestation, but we get the first experience through the journey, so we can actually grasp what that feels like as we go along.
Okay. And then you get into the Eastern philosophy. Talk a little bit about that. And how did that come into part of your tool?
Right. Well, I come from a family with two different religions, and that created a lot of conflicts in my life. You know, like mommy's one, daddy's one, and
oh my goodness,
who am I going to be? Right. So I think that was also a mix of a desire for me to, because through my studies, I did a seminary at the Temple of Kriya Yoga. And so, yes, there was a lot on yoga philosophy, but there was a big section on also world religions and philosophies, like, of course, the main religions you can think of, but also like Buddhism, Taoism. So really broad net of evaluation of and study of philosophies. And so that really was healing for me, in the sense that I needed to find where I stand, and also not be limited to one specific set of philosophy or beliefs, so to speak. And it was really healing to see how they're all different, but all the religions, at least to me, had a similar message.
Yeah, you know? Absolutely. I have studied that very carefully, particularly since I'm here in Thailand. And it's been amazing to me as I've looked at Hinduism, as I've looked at Buddhism, obviously as I've looked at Christianity. If you get to the basic message, it's amazing how similar it is. And it's all about coming back to who you really are, becoming the individual that you genuinely are. But because of all those imprints and society and everything else, it's kind of covered you up. In fact, I was talking to someone, and I love the example they used. He said, it's like you have a mirror, and you just have to start wiping it cleaner and cleaner and cleaner. And over time, you get rid of all of that dirt, and all of a sudden, there you are.
Yeah, that's beautiful. I love that metaphor. It's like we hear the layers of the onion, but I've never heard the mirror metaphor. That's
I hadn't either. I just heard
pretty
it the
good.
other day, and
Pretty
I
good.
love that. So let's talk about now the people pleasing. What
Yes.
happens with women who find themselves in that situation of consistent people pleasing? What happens to their lives?
What happens to their lives is that they often feel drained because they're doing too much for others, but also it's not necessarily, sometimes it can be even a perceived doing too much for others, because when you keep abandoning yourself for the profit of the exterior, something outside of yourself, in itself, it's draining, because you always have to wear some sort of a persona or a mask or tweak yourself, always analyzing, assessing. This is draining. And then because maybe you're like, oh, did this person laugh, or was that too loud? Oh my gosh, I wonder how they took this. Oh, why did I say that? And so all of this kind of mental activity during, post, before is draining too. So there's kind of that sense, at least that's how I felt also in my life when I was really stuck in that. And there's that sense of, I can't really be myself, because if I'm myself, people will be disappointed because people won't love me. So I have to work hard to please others. And some people who struggle with people pleasing would be more chameleons. Some would be more overgivers, right? There's different kind of flavors already within the umbrella. So depending what their flavor is, it will look differently. But if I kind of zoom out and look at the general tendency, is that sensation of like not being able to be yourself and working so hard to feel the love from the outside in. So I lead them, and that's what I did for my own journey, to switch that, to build it from the inside out. Because
So
when we,
go ahead. Go ahead. I'm sorry.
No, I was just going to say, when we find that strength, that love, that self-love, that self-worth, and it's not, overnight within ourselves, it's a lot easier to be with people, however people are.
So here's my question. Do you find that a lot of times, and I don't know what your personal experience was, but do you find that as they're that people pleaser mentality, that they oftentimes attract people who will take advantage of that?
That is very possible, because it's an energy. So let's say we're talking about, I was just talking to a client the other day. She's always saying yes. She doesn't want to say no, and she's never being herself. And it's kind of that energy of love me, right? But people can feel that. So either people who just want you to be who you are and enjoy, like they just don't want you to just say yes if you mean a no. They kind of sense that weirdness. Maybe it could be repulsive for them. But then to your point, someone who's just like, great, I can have this person do whatever I want because they feel bad enough, right? And that could be a bit more of an energetic match in that case.
And it can be a codependent relationship, can't it?
Yeah,
yeah.
Absolutely.
And I think a lot of women find themselves in that codependency, and it's really tough for them to get out of it. So how do you help someone to set those boundaries, to learn to say no, to realize that they don't have to please all of the time, except maybe themselves, which is a different thing?
Yes. And that's a realization I had way back when in my dorm in college. And something happened with my parents. I told you the difference. And I realized I was never going to be able to please both of them at the same time. And it got me to a really dark place. And then what got me out is exactly what you said. Well, this is not working. And by trying to please everybody all the time, it's me I'm not pleasing. So the first step really with women is to start realizing, like, what is it costing them? There's general patterns, but it's going to be also specific to the person. What is it costing them to be in their people-pleasing tendencies, whether it's overgiving or maybe sometimes isolating ourselves because it's just so draining to be with people. We just become loners, but then we're lonely. So there's a lot of different consequences, so to speak, of this pattern. And then what are you going to gain when you overcome this, when you're able to be yourself with others? Like, what is there to gain? How great can your life become? And so we're starting to work with that leverage. Because even though it might be like, not great. It's comfortable. It's what we've done and we know it. So it kind of, in a weird way, feels safe to stay there. So to make any movement whatsoever, we need to start looking like, what is it costing me to stay there? And what will I gain once I break free from it?
Well, and you talk about it, and what I found is a lot of times people don't even understand what's going on. And how would an individual, how would a woman be able to recognize, number one, and be aware of the fact that she has fallen into that trap of people pleasing? Yeah. Are there some specific indications, red flags, whatever you want to call them, that you could share with the audience that are listening, where someone can go, wow, that's me?
Yes. So there's many, but the ones that come to my mind right now, if you feel like you can't be yourself, or if because if you are yourself, you'll disappoint. If you can't deal with people being upset at you and you're just trying to keep the peace by not speaking your truth or sharing your opinion, if you say yes all the time because you don't want to say no. I had a client, she had a group of friends that she didn't even like that much. But every time they would ask her to go have a coffee, because she felt bad to say no, she just went, even though she didn't enjoy her time. And then we dug into that and she realized, like, well, she didn't spend as much time with her daughter because, of course, she worked full time. And so she had a little free time. And then I was like, well, but you don't even enjoy their company. Just realizing that for her was like, that's true. I know why am I doing this? Right? Sometimes we don't even realize, but it's like, are you doing things that you don't want to be doing just because you're afraid of being rejected, being talked behind your back, losing friendship? Right? So those are like the major signs, I would say. Or maybe you're just giving all the time. Like the fear of, I have that, like, if you give to me, I feel very uncomfortable. I need to even it out. I need to give to you at least so we're even or more. I don't want to feel indebted because then I feel like maybe I'm not good enough. I need to give and make sure that I feel that tank. So I'm like, I'm okay.
That's interesting. It brings to mind when I was living in Idaho, we had a neighbor, an older couple, and we were all living on an acre, right, of lawn pretty much. And they were the kindest, most giving couple that I've ever met. If a family needed something, they were there to help them, whether it was food or whatever. And one day I sent my boys over and said, hey, let us cut your lawn for you, because they were aging. And it's like, oh, no, we can handle it. They could not accept the very thing that they did for others. And I found that so fascinating.
Yes.
So let me ask you, go ahead.
I was just going to say, the reframe there, if anyone's watching and kind of is in that place, is to start realizing, because probably you guys wanted to, it felt good for you guys to mow their lawn.
Absolutely. I wanted my kids to understand what it was like to be able to serve someone else.
So by allowing themselves to receive, they're actually giving.
Exactly. Yeah. So how do people, number one, when they catch themselves in that situation, what's the first step to breaking it? And I know you have a story you can tell about someone named Lena.
Yes. Well, Lena took one of my courses and she came to the course. It's called Break Free, 3 Keys to End People Pleasing. And we go deep into 3 main mind shifts to help break free of it. And she started the class, really thinking people pleasing was a good thing. Like, it was having bad impact, but like it was making her a good person, quote unquote. So she was not prioritizing herself or self-care, saying yes to things. She even had started a coaching business a little bit. Like, she wanted to do it, but struggled putting herself out there, because that's also a consequence. When you feel like you need approval, how can you kind of put yourself out there now, not knowing how it's going to be received? That feels very unsafe. And so out of going through the course, of course, we start with the leverage. That's always the number one piece, like I was sharing, like, what is it costing you and where you're up to gain? And then we look at some mind shifts in that course. So to start understanding that we're not responsible for how other people feel. And even though it feels that way, and it feels like sometimes there can be something we say that triggers something in them, but it triggers something in them only because there's something to be triggered from. There's some sort of wound. You can have two different people in the exact same situation reacting completely differently. Some people might be like, wow, how dare they? And they'll, oh, that didn't bother me. Why? Because there's either a wound or not to be reactivated. And so things like that we learned throughout the course out of doing this, I just followed up with her a few weeks back, and she's really gotten a lot from it. She's like now expressing herself more, having more, doing more things for herself, taking care of herself. But she also got that, and that was just at the end of the course. From doing that, she also got 2 paid clients from her coaching, which she was only doing free sessions. And she finally kind of like was able to attract that because she started to shift within herself that she was deserving of things. Like she didn't need to, look for crumbs of anything outside of herself to tell her that she's good enough, that she could build that from the inside.
Well, and one of the comments I've heard a lot over the years is, that's just how I am. So what would you say to someone that has that feeling if they don't express it, but it's, you know what, that's just who I am? What would you say to them?
I would say be careful what you put after I am. And that's something I teach too. We say like, oh, I'm such a people pleaser. I'm a people pleaser. Well, are you? Because the shift is, okay, what if I say instead, I'm a people pleaser, and I have women like feel into that? How does that feel like? And then shake it off. I have people pleasing tendencies. Like that feels a lot different, because if it's a tendency, I can do something about it. If it's something I am, like, how can I change who I am? This is how I am. That makes it a lot difficult. Like, you weren't born and someone said, oh, it's a girl and this one's a people pleaser. That's not a trait. That's not like, there's no genes of people pleasing or, so really it started to look, what are you looking to gain out of these things? And starting to see how, oh, I learned that along the way because I wanted to feel loved and accepted. And a lot of people can, when I talk to women, they can always think about, oh yeah, in my childhood, this and that. Again, some were traumatic, some were not. We're just like a teacher or this person, and I definitely did that. And so if it's a learned behavior, how can it be who you are?
And what's interesting, and I don't know how much you get into the neural aspects of it, the neural pathways, but in my mind, it's a habit that we have developed. It's a habit. And it's tough to change habits, but habits can be changed. And realistically, as you're working with them, do you find that they actually change those neural pathways and kind of move away and minimize some of those negative affecting ones and really start to develop the ones that create positivity for them in their lives?
Absolutely. And that's kind of how I design my course and how I work also one-on-one. It's all about little steps. It's not something like, oh, now I realize that it comes from childhood, so it's gone. No, you did it over and over and over and over again for so many years. That's going to be the knee-jerk reaction in the moment. So the first step is to start realizing it even after the fact. Oh, okay, I did this thing, right? And that happened. Okay, got it. And then, okay, what am I going to do next time? And then you start catching yourself sooner and sooner. And then you catch yourself with the small things, but then the things that are very emotionally activating, maybe not so much, right? And it's a journey. And so it's really important. That's why I call my company With Kind Awareness, because we want to bring a lot of kindness to the awareness. Oftentimes when we become aware of things, I know for me, was a good way to just hit myself in the head. Oh, I know better. I should have done that. But no, let's be kind. Like this, like you said, it's a habit. It's been wired into your brain over sometimes decades. Don't expect yourself to change overnight, but also you can expect yourself to make big shifts if you pay attention and you focus on that.
Well, it's interesting too. I mean, a lot of people talk about mindset, they talk about consciousness, but as you're working with women, what do you find you focus on? Do you really talk to them about their mindset, their consciousness, and the fact that if they're truly conscious of what's going on? In fact, when I was in another school after I finished my dental practice, one of the things they talked about was stepping outside of yourself and kind of being that third party outside of yourself and just observing and listening and asking questions. And to me, that's developing a mindset where you're actually able to look at it. And as you say, it's a tendency. It's not who I am. Oh, here's a tendency that I have. And so as you talk to women about that, do you find that talking about mindset, talking about consciousness, what do you talk to them about relative to that?
Yes, I would say all of the above. The observer is something I use a lot because when you are, and this is something from philosophies like Eckhart Tolle, ancient philosophies, NLP uses it. So it's everywhere because it's so important. When you're first experience, like you fully associated with what's happening, you don't have choice oftentimes. You're just going up, with your patterns. And then when you just take a step back, right? That's what we say, take a step back, right? Even in our language, we know. So when you take a step back and you start up that in that space, there's choice. And you might take a step back and still feel a bit associated and be like, I'm going to do it anyway, right? But there's still a choice. And then you get better and better and be like, well, hold on. And that's the same thing when we work with the inner dialogue too. Like we say things to ourselves that can be mean, that can lead us to go and do the same old patterns. So having that observer mindset of like, well, hold on, is it me saying that? Or is it maybe like a childhood part of me, a certain judge part of me, however you want to see it, that is saying that potentially to protect me in their own way, even though that doesn't feel great. But if I'm observing it and I'm saying like, oh, okay, this is not me, this is just a part of me who's chiming in, I can decide if I'm letting it run the show, be in the driver's seat or not.
Well, and as you talk about that, one of the things that comes to my mind is this concept of change. And, I think people really struggle with change. And I think it takes a lot of bravery. Number one, if you've become aware of what's going on, you recognize that, then it's overcoming that fear of change and developing that bravery to the point that you're really willing to take the steps, for instance, that you teach in your courses. So how do you help people that you see say, oh, yeah, I want to do this, but then you see that fear is greater than their willingness to change? How do you help them to develop that courage, that bravery to really follow through and start on that process?
It all comes back to what it's costing them and shifting that focus, because for as long as they're focused on what it would cause them to change, the pain of changing and what they gain by staying in the status quo, they're going to stay in the status quo. That's just normal. Every human being would. But if we change our focus to like, well, hold on, how about maybe it's costing me more to stay in the status quo? And I could gain more by making the change than to stay here. Now we're starting to tip the scale. Why people change oftentimes, if we don't do that consciously, there's going to be sometimes, probably if you think in your own life, the moments where maybe you made a change, something really dramatic happened. There was a threshold moment. Sometimes it might be a loss of a relationship. A lot of people, like a lot of women, they divorce or they change relationship and they realize, I don't want to be that way anymore. Like there's something big that happens. Sometimes it's getting sick, unfortunately. And in these moments, we're like, okay, enough. Suddenly, why? Because in that moment, it becomes more painful to continue that way. And it tips the scale. But we don't have to wait until a threshold moment happens because those aren't fun. We can start doing that consciously by changing our focus to what is it costing us that's more than this than the opposite, and what are we going to gain by making the change. And we might forget. We have to remind ourselves.
Yeah. And, you talk about personal responsibility, ability. And, as you're talking about, what you're really doing is you're saying that an individual can literally change their life. And, as you mentioned, you grew up in a household of two different religions. I don't know if they were Christian or Islam or whatever that happened to be. But so often I hear the comment, and sometimes I'm actually guilty of saying this myself. Oh, well, this is God's will. This is God's will, so I'm going to accept it, rather than realizing that, guess what? I can create the life that I want. And how do you help women to realize that they literally have the ability to make the changes to create the life that they truly desire.
Yeah. Well, I love that because it's a duality. It's God's will, but also if you come from that perspective, God gave us free will.
Yes.
So it's both. And it's not, is it God's will? Is it free will? Maybe it's both. Right? And so if someone is in that mindset, well, it's just God's will, I can't change anything. Well, hold on, like you got free will, right? That's from that part too. And then we can see, I would help them see how some days, based on how they choose to feel or what they focus on, they can have a great day or a bad day. And it's not like it was destined to be that way, but it's in the perspective of things. And oftentimes coming to the observer mindset can help because, and even I do that with myself when I'm feeling like I'm struggling emotionally, I'll just kind of pop out a little bit and be like, nothing's happening right now. Here's this woman sitting in a room. It's silent. There's sun outside. All this stuff is happening inside of here. It's not real right there outside. And so this is where the choice lies. How are you going to be inside of you? That's the self-responsibility. Yes, people will be peopling. Yes, the world will be worlding and stuff will happen that it's out of your control. But even if we look in really tough situations in history, we have people who survived it, that how they did it was with their mindset, with focusing on very hard, but finding that one thing positive, maybe, or that kept them in a place. And those are the people who survived. So it is possible to create that strength from within and take responsibility for how you feel and how you're reacting to things. And that has a direct correlation to your quality of life, regardless of what's happening outside of yourself.
And perhaps it's God's will for you to exercise your free will and learn how to create that life of joy and happiness. I know I think of the comment, the man is that he might have joy. And that's his will. But it's our responsibility to a large degree to be able to accomplish that. So a couple of questions. Number one, how do people find you? And do you do one-on-one or is it mainly classes?
I do one-on-one and I do courses as well. I'm actually building another body of work that's actually came to me along my journey, which is the 4 empowered feminine archetypes. So I'm talking a lot about that too, and using the wisdom of these archetypes to empower ourselves and grow. And so I talk a lot about that. I have a Facebook group called the Empowered Feminine Rising. This is free, of course, you can join. And you can find me on Instagram at With Kind Awareness. I go live there and share a lot of wisdom on that channel too. And of course, on my website, withkindawareness.com, as a hub for everything I do. So I do live classes, recorded classes, one-on-one, all of the above.
That's great. So as we close, here's my question. As you just sit and pause for a minute and think, what would be the message that you would like to share with the audience that they take away as we finish the podcast?
I would say people pleasing is not who you are. People pleasing is something you've learned, and it's possible to unlearn it and go to different depths within yourself of joy, of freedom, and of enjoyment of life. And it's a path, it's a journey of kindness and awareness, and it's totally worth it, and you deserve it.
I love it. Thank you. Thank you, Nedjma. Thanks so
You're
much.
welcome.
It amazes me how fast time goes by. And, we're limited to literally 45 to 47 minutes. And here we are ready to go. And, what you're doing just fascinates me. The fact that you're able to help women to do this, I think, is just remarkable.
Thank you.
Yeah,
I appreciate you, Dr. Joe.
Kudos going to you for doing that, really. And folks, thanks for listening. I hope this has made a difference for you and that something resonates with you. If so, get to that website and, again, join the group, whatever it takes, and really understand that you can, in fact, change your life. You have the ability to do it. So anyway, this is Dr. Doug saying have a wonderful week and namaste.
Namaste, Dr. Doug.